There is nothing wrong with your radio.
Do not attempt to adjust the volume.
We are controlling the broadcast.
For the next hour we will control all that you hear.
You are about to experience the knowledge and insights of the Media Mothership.
Welcome to episode 92 of Media Mothership, broadcasting out of Edge Radio Studios in Nipaluna, Hobart, Tasmania. And as always, on this show, we explore how media can shape our understanding of the world around us. We've got a couple of really interesting topics on today's show, including a deep dive into apocalyptic video game narratives and imagery. I thought, what more appropriate thing to discuss than video games, given the Australian government's recent effort to get through Parliament the legislation around restricting social media for children under 16. So that's just passed today. It'll come into effect in 12 months' time. But it has meant that it appears social media platforms are going to need to take steps to ensure that people under 16 cannot sign up for accounts, such as on Facebook, Snapchat, Reddit, Instagram, X. There are some apps that are going to be fine, it appears, in 12 months' time. Those include Messenger Kids, WhatsApp, Kids Helpline, Google Classroom, and YouTube. Wow. So, yeah, some stuff will be fine, but, this legislation has just come through. Highly problematic, in my point of view. And one of the ways in which we could possibly address this is through one of my favorite clips from the satirical news broadcaster The Onion, who many years ago now, maybe 15 years ago, asked this question of not social media, but violent video games. Their question was, are violent video games preparing kids for the future? And I think we could ask the same thing of social media in a satirical way, but let's hear how they set up this question.
Moving on. Many of today's most popular video games take place in dangerous post-apocalyptic landscapes. But are these games doing enough to prepare our kids for the actual post-apocalyptic future we will all soon face?
Well, I think they are. Studies have shown that these games are quite effective at teaching our kids skills that they'll need after the apocalypse, like finding shotgun ammo and leading elite squads of super soldiers.
But these aren't the advanced skills that they're going to need. They're going to need the more practical skills like how to build a shelter from abandoned cars, or how to find drinking water by collecting the morning dew in human skulls.
Or how to deal with depression when the sun is blocked out for 500 years by a cloud of radioactive dust.
Absolutely. Now, that's the type of knowledge these kids are going to need when their world has been turned into a brutal hellscape.
So that's part of The Onion's wonderful take on media effect theory, I guess, in this sense, in terms of our violent video games, preparing our kids for the horrible future that might await them. Yeah, is the Australian government's efforts here preparing kids for their future? It'll be interesting 12 months watching the debate. So what I want to look at is kind of look back in time to a short historical review of apocalypse, the idea of the apocalypse in video games, and unpack some of the ways that can get treated. It's I think, a timely moment to be looking at violent video games and apocalyptic video games. There's a great a series of texts, video games, movies that have looked at this, most recently Fallout. So what we'll do is we'll start by unpacking it in terms of a couple of really interesting ways. One of the ways we're going to look at it is by listening to a series of ideas proposed by the academic William Knoblauch, who wrote an article called Game Over, a Cold War Kid Reflects on Apocalyptic Video Games. We're going to ask, how have video games shaped our understanding of things like the Cold War in particular, during the late 40s, 50s, and into the 60s, and how those apocalyptic worlds and their portrayal from video games of the 70s and 80s, 90s up till today provide some really interesting insights. And in many ways, you could say these apocalyptic video games defined that early video game generation. So let's consider those questions. And feel free to message in. We're streaming on Twitch, as well as broadcasting over edgeradio.org.au and the FM system on 99.3 FM and the DAB. You can SMS us on 0488811707 or chat to us in Twitch. What are your earliest memories, if you have any, of playing apocalyptic video games? Did they shape your perspective of what Cold War was like? And as The Onion asks, what video games best capture the way to survive a post-apocalyptic future? Are they portrayed in an effective way? So let's start first by diving a little bit into the audiobook version of that chapter, and we'll discuss some of the key ideas that are being raised. So this is William Knoblauch and his piece on Game Over, a Cold War Kid Reflects on Apocalyptic Video Games.
A Cold War Kid Reflects on Apocalyptic Video Games by William Knoblauch. Read by Steve Marvel. In video games, the apocalypse has been portrayed as both terrifying, oddly alluring, and strangely nostalgic. It all depends on which slice of video game history you focus on. But one thing has remained true throughout the decades. Game designers keep returning to end-of-the-world scenarios as a setting. In this essay, Bill Knoblauch examines the shifting image of the video game apocalypse from the Cold War up to today.
Nuclear war. The very words conjure images of mushroom clouds, gas masks, and bewildered children ducking and covering under their school desks. But it's the aftermath of such a conflict that truly captures our imaginations, in large part because there's no real-world equivalent we can relate to. Introduction to Fallout 3. When I was 5, odds were good that you could find me plopped down in the living room, joystick in hand, playing my Atari 2600. The console had been around for years, but we didn't get one until 1983, the year of the video game industry crash. Too many games, bad games, had ruined the market, so cartridges were cheap. Soon, I owned most of the classics: Donkey Kong, Pac-Man, Q*bert, even the infamously bad E.T. the Extraterrestrial.
So we'll pause it there, and it might be worth setting the kind of atmosphere for this generation that he's mapping out here, the early initial video game engagement in the late 70s with a great Atari 2600 commercial.
You're a starship captain in an asteroid field. Blast them with your lasers or blow up your shield. As a missile commander defending your city, if you're not quick enough, they'll show no pity. The invaders won't stop us from the skies they drop.
3 out-of-this-world games from Atari, the #1 video computer system with more games than any other.
Everyone's gone Atari, the #1 video game.
So that's the Atari promotional campaign for the Atari 2600 for Asteroids, Missile Command, and Space Invaders. And of course, that's this kind of early first generation of apocalyptic type imagery in games, which can get unpacked in this way. Let's return now to how we could consider that.
Favorite Atari game was Missile Command. Its premise was pretty simple. As missiles drop from the top of the screen, you shoot them down to defend cities below. Destroy all the missiles, and you advance to the next level. The higher the level, the faster the attack. When all the cities are destroyed, which is inevitable, it's game over. Missile Command was pretty intuitive, but as a kid, I wondered why the cities were under attack.
So, again, one of the great things about Missile Command is does it hold up? So, first we'll have a quick listen to an interesting contemporary take on it, which is Conan, the ex-Late Night host, who on his Team Coco video channel did a kind of react video to playing Missile Command recently. So let's see how he sums up this game from the 1970s as he plugs it in and attempts to play it.
Right. All right, now we're going to look at Missile Command, another Atari game that promises much more than it can deliver with the cover art. Aliens from the planet of Crystal have begun an attack on the planet Zardon. The Krytolians have begun fight. It's so sad that someone had to write this. And you know what? We know we're about to see 3 blips. They prepared me for, oh, there we go, yeah? Those are Zardonians and Krytolians, all right. What do I do?
So you move the dash around. Yeah, so the colored circles knock out the blips.
Well, okay, while you were explaining it to me, I lost my city. But you know what? This city looks like shit, so I don't care. At the time, what's really scary is this was about the sophistication of the computer that controlled all our nuclear missiles. The Russians probably saw these games and thought, we should attack now. These are...
So again, a wonderful encapsulation of that kind of really basic graphic bit level engagements with apocalyptic imagery and dovetailing into the Cold War. Of course, as Conan pointed out, one of the great kind of bait and switches for video games was how deceptively their advertising, particularly the cover art, looked fantastic. Missile Command, brilliant cover art, a controller sitting behind a panel desk as missiles are being launched and you're attempting to prevent them from hitting and destroying your cities, which is basically what the gameplay is. You've got these vertical lines hitting down, or diagonal lines hitting down from the top of the screen, which are kind of missile trails. And you've got a kind of cursor that you can move around the screen in your attempts to prevent and block the missile from striking your city. If we have a look at a great Missile Command commercial, which again captures the world that they're trying to portray here. This is from 1980.
I'm going out to inspect the troops.
Yes, sir.
Regular change today, General?
This is Atari Missile Command. Millions of people are mad for it in thousands of game centers across the country.
Interplanetary war is hurt.
Attention all generals. Now you can get your own Atari Missile Command video game and practice saving the world in the privacy of your home. Missile Command, only from Atari.
Practice saving the world in the privacy of your own lounge. So again, that's Missile Command, and in terms of its significance, we can hear that reflected in the chapter we're hearing now.
The game's manual explains that aliens from the planet of Krytol have begun an attack on the planet Zardon. The Krytolians are warriors out to destroy and seize the planet of Zardon, the last of the peaceful planets. Krytol? Zardon? Atari's B-movie plotline did more than provide an explanation of gameplay. It changed Missile Command's original theme. Game designer Dave Thurer originally envisioned Missile Command to be a realistic missile defense game set in the present, a Cold War game that would get people to become aware of the horrors of a nuclear war. Considering the technological limitations he faced, Thurer's arcade classic presented a surprisingly detailed nuclear vision. Missile Command features an anti-ballistic missile system, intercontinental ballistic missiles, multiple independent re-entry vehicles, and smart bombs, all real Cold War nuclear weapons. When all your cities are finally destroyed, instead of the ubiquitous "Game Over" screen, Missile Command concluded with a far more ominous warning about the possibility of an atomic apocalypse. The end. Note: Atari graphics were so basic that sometimes storylines were needed to make sense of a game. For example, Adventure's manual explains that an evil magician has stolen the enchanted chalice and has hidden it somewhere in the kingdom. The object of the game is to rescue the enchanted chalice and place it inside the golden castle where it belongs. This was welcome information because in the game you control a movable dot that drags blurry items around the screen. In the Atari age, a little story went a long way. Screenshot 1.
Again, what we can see there is the significance of the imagery that's being created in the video game text there.
Can likely be traced to the very Cold War tensions that inspired Missile Command in the first place. When Thurr designed the game in 1980, the Soviets had just invaded Afghanistan, Ronald Reagan promised to escalate the arms race, and conservative pundits were bragging that they could win a nuclear war. In response, a nuclear freeze campaign swept the nation, begging both sides to stop making nukes, and by 1982, it was the largest anti-nuclear protest movement in American history. In March, Reagan called the Soviet Union an evil empire, and in September 1983, the Soviets shot down a civilian airliner. A month later, right around the time I was shooting digital missiles in Missile Command, real U.S. nuclear warheads were on their way to Western Europe, while Soviet medium-range SS-20s already lined the Eastern Bloc. By November...
I will just pause it quickly there. So, of course, that's quite an interesting little deep dive into the I guess part of the history of these apocalyptic games. What I'm going to play, so I was referencing there the Ronald Reagan speech, the Evil Empire Ronald Reagan speech. Have you ever heard that?
No.
Great, we're going to listen to it now.
Cool.
So this is the infamous speech that Ronald Reagan gave. And again, what this is kind of setting up is that to understand early video games from the 70s, you need to understand the Cold War. And part of the Cold War was, Reagan kind of also bringing it back with this speech that he gave, which is that kind of,
So who was Reagan?
It's worth stating it because, there might be someone out there who doesn't know. Of course, he was president of the United States during the 80s, multiple terms. We won't go too much into the politics of what Reagan represented, except for this Evil Empire speech, which, so this is minute 10.
Let us be aware that while they preach the supremacy of the state, declare its omnipotence over individual man, and predict its eventual domination of all peoples on the earth, they are the focus of evil in the modern world. But if history teaches anything, it teaches that simple-minded appeasement or wishful thinking about our adversaries is folly. It means the betrayal of our past, the squandering of our freedom. So I urge you to speak out against those who would place the United States in a position of military and moral inferiority. I've always believed that old Screwtape reserved his best efforts for those of you in the church. So in your...
All right, well, I think the old timers is hitting in.
Well, he's a good speaker, but Trump is better.
Yeah. Well, I guess what's interesting with that clip is the stakes are high. We've got this evil Iranian empire, the emergence of a kind of new battleground to employ it. I guess very similar, maybe not the Trump analogy, but maybe the Australian government social media ban analogy, right? There's this kind of pervasive evil that we need to go to war against. And the reason why I'm setting up. So Lord Taylor's just joined us.
Oh yeah, by the way, yeah. Hi.
And to bring up to speed, the reason I'm setting up this discussion of apocalyptic video games is that it reminded me a lot of the Onion sketch where they asked the question, how are violent video games preparing today's youth for the future?
For war.
For the apocalypse. And it's a nice satirical take on questions of, what youth should be, what youth should be doing, what it means to be young. And it's interesting when you're surrounded by material like you were in the Cold War of an apocalypse. Today's narrative that isn't really, you've got series like the Fallout TV show based on the video game, which are kind of engaging with this apocalyptic imagery.
Are we going into sort of like fantasy apocalyptic, like zombies and?
Well, we'll get around to that.
Okay.
Because this article that we're listening to is written by a history professor, and he's setting up the argument that he's kind of bemoaning a bit. He's talking about his own childhood, and he had the Atari, and he played games like Missile Command. And during that period of the 70s, they were engaged with ideas of the Cold War, right? So Missile Command, the developer that pitched it said, he wanted it to be something that would get people asking questions about, how not necessarily nuclear war works, but how apocalyptic nuclear war would be. It would be destructive and damaging.
So like how Space Invaders is preparing us for war with an alien race.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Pixels movie happened, and we saw that happening.
Well, look, and he brings up these more modern cases like the Fallout universe where you've got zombies inhabiting it. And he says, that those aren't engaged with necessarily ideological struggles, which these games were. In the 70s, Missile Command and the narratives of the apocalypse was rooted in some ideological questions of that time. You had the evil. Well, this is what the Evil Empire speech is all about: ideology. That you have these two ideologically opposed forces, right? In the Cold War, it was communist Russia and the communist bloc against the democratic countries, and it was an ideologically framed apocalypse, right? It was going to be launched. It was a zero-sum game, right? You either win or lose. Well, actually, it was mutually assured destruction, not zero-sum game. It was just mutually assured destruction. So he's saying, the ideological underpinnings don't really pay off anymore. But we'll pick it up here. So 5 minutes and 33 into the chapter that goes for 44 minutes.
Wow.
So we're not going to get through it all, but we'll set up his opening argument and offer a reflection as gamers ourselves on if we share some of these sentiments. So let's hear what is framing now.
The movie, The Day After, reflected the nation's heightened levels of atomic anxiety. An estimated 100 million viewers tuned in for a faux atomic attack on Middle America, prompting heated debates around the country.
Have you ever seen that movie, The Day After?
Day After? No, I've seen The Day After Tomorrow, but...
It's interesting. Yeah, no, The Day After came out 80s, and I wonder if The Day After Tomorrow is kind of based on that. It was considered to be one of the really kind of shocking TV pieces created. We'll listen to the trailer. This is the trailer for The Day After.
159er. In ignition. First tower, voice 61. NATO intelligence sources report a massive buildup.
So we've got settings of military units being mobilized.
The president is presently in direct communication.
Three Soviet tanks deployed.
Current world intelligence situation, and you might pay particular note to the nuclear submarines off the east and west coast.
And there's all this kind of rising military anxiety, military being mobilized in the air.
I really don't think either side wants to be the first to use a nuclear device.
It's not a question of who, but where.
East Germany sealed off the borders to West Berlin.
It's not going to happen.
West German access corridors.
People are crazy, but not that crazy.
I don't believe this is happening.
We have a massive attack against the U.S. at this time. ICBMs.
Yeah.
Over 300 missiles inbound now.
Either we fired first and they're going to try to hit what's left.
But they fired first, and we just got our missiles out of the ground in time.
So it's a very, it's
the sounds of war and destruction.
Well, yes, and it's an attempt to do it very realistically.
Yeah.
In terms of not a complete. There we go. Sorry, we're going to restream again now. There we go. I like that ratio.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So that's the day after tomorrow. The movie show the day after tomorrow.
I thought it was the day after.
Yep. Sorry, the day after. You're right. Oh. Let's just keep rolling the dice. So let's now pick it up again with how this was being discussed.
Considering this national level of nuclear fear, America's highest since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, Atari's space alien plotline makes sense. It presented a kid-friendly narrative during a dangerous time. Note: originally, Missile Command was entitled Armageddon and featured real cities along the California coast. In its original arcade incarnation, Missile Command provided one of the first apocalyptic visions in video game history. Yet even now, years after the Cold War's conclusion, the end of the world remains a popular trope for the medium. Gamers continue to explore post-apocalyptic landscapes, fight off extraterrestrial invasions, and battle roaming zombie hordes. I'm not immune to this fascination. I still enjoy games about Armageddon. But over 3 decades, something changed. Unlike 1980s games with serious undertones, today's games largely present the apocalypse lazily, as a throwaway narrative backdrop for first-person shooters. I want to trace this evolution to look back at some of the most interesting apocalyptic video games ever made.
So we'll return in a second to hear more of some of the most apocalyptic video games ever made here on Edge Radio 99.3 FM with Media Mothership, hosted by Dr. Craig and Lord Taylor. Hey, you're listening to Media Mothership here on Edge Radio 99.3 FM. That was some really groovy... Oh, I've introduced some buzzing to the studio now. Damn. Anyway, really groovy tunes by Clean D's.
Yeah, really good song. Enjoyed that.
No, the artist is King Billy. So that's by King Billy, and the song's Clean D's. Anyway, we're listening now to a deep dive into apocalyptic video game material, and we left on a real cliffhanger in terms of what is the historical theorist William Knoblauch. I believe that's how his pronoun's pronounced. I've struggled with that the whole episode today.
That can't be right.
SMSN now if you have a better version of that surname. And he was about to unveil core video game texts that defined this apocalypse. So we'll rejoin now with William Knoblauch with his theory.
I don't cover every single one. That task, while technically possible, would also be unproductive.
Oh,
instead,
that's great.
I select games that present the apocalypse meaningfully and thoughtfully.
You Dalek.
Like films and books, video games are cultural texts. They say something about when they were made. Like improvements in gameplay and graphics, video game narratives have also evolved and continue to do so. This evolution reveals our common cultural assumptions about what we consider to be plausible end-of-the-world scenarios. Depending on when they were developed, that list includes nuclear war, alien invasion, and outbreak narratives.
Yeah, so, in terms of those three, nuclear war, alien invasion, and outbreak narratives, as plausible stories, right? So there'll be a game where that happens plausibly. I guess the outbreak narrative is the most contemporary, right? You've got things like The Last of Us, right? The fungal outbreak. Most zombie films are based around an outbreak of some sort, I'd say.
But are we talking about films or just games?
We'll treat it more broadly at this point. But
Because I'm thinking of the Plague Inc.
Yes. Yep, the game Plague Inc., which is again, another Contagion game. I love the.
That is bad.
And then Alien Invasion. Alien Invasion. I mean, that certainly reminds me of the 1950s. Well, I guess Space Invaders from the 1970s video game. Any recent Alien Invasion
games?
Yeah, let's start with games.
Alien Invasion. I can't think of any, to be perfectly honest. At the moment, so the most recent game that I've bought, I've only bought one game in the last probably 5 years. Call of Duty Black Ops 6.
Oh, okay. Well, that's an infection game, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a zombie mode.
Yeah, there's a zombie mode. I'm playing zombie mode at the moment. Good fun.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay, well, I've just done a quick search. So we've got Alien Isolation, Alien Invasion, I guess it is, right? Like the Alien. Have you played the Crisis games, Crisis 1 and 2?
Is that with a Y? C-R-Y?
Yeah, C-R-Y.
No, I haven't played it, no.
Known for stunning graphics and intense gameplay, these games feature a hostile alien species called the Ceph. Halo is kind of Alien Invasion.
Yeah.
See? Earth Defense Force series, I've played some of those. Japanese game. It's basically a fun action series, third person. You're shooting alien insects. Helldivers 2, right? That's Alien Invasion. Mass Effect 3, part of the acclaimed Mass Effect series. This game involves defending the galaxy from massive alien threat.
Okay.
Mass Effect 3. Alien Colonial Marines, of course, another alien one. Serious Sam. I've seen that on Steam sales all the time. I've never picked it up.
Yeah, I didn't know it was about aliens.
Set in the universe of the Alien... No, sorry, that's Alien Colonial Marines. A fast-paced shooter where you fight against alien overlords and their minions. A Nuclear Invasion. So Nuclear Invasion video games. Any of those?
That's got to be Fallout.
Yep.
Fallout 76. Fallout 1, Fallout 2, Fallout 3, Fallout 4.
Oh, Metro series? You played the Metro game?
No. I have got that in my library, though.
Yep. Post-apocalyptic Russia. First-person shooter in the Moscow metro system. The Wasteland series. I think they're doing something with the Wasteland series now. It's an RPG. Allows players to lead a group of survivors in a world devastated by nuclear conflict. Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl. Again, you always see those in the Steam sales. It takes place at Chernobyl exclusion zone filled with mutants, anomalies, and other hazards. Last of Us, which they also put as a nuclear one, but that's not a 5. ChatGPT's wrong there. Drinking game for Media Mothership. Take a drink. Craig mentions ChatGPT. Yep. So, okay, I think we've run through a list, so let's see how Dr. William puts that together.
Okay.
No.
I mean, this is great.
Well, yeah.
Which players strive to save themselves. A far too brief history of the apocalypse. It is an ancient Greek term meaning an unveiling of that which is hidden. It goes hand in hand with eschatology, the theology of last things. Apocalyptic and eschatological visions appear in most major religions, such as the good versus evil struggle of Zoroastrianism and Judaism's Book of Ezekiel.
Okay, so yeah, that's defining that key term apocalypse. So its roots are revealing that which should be not revealed. And yeah, obviously, within Christian dogma, there's the idea of the final apocalypse, battle of good versus evil.
Yeah.
Any other apocalypse? I mean, you're an ordained minister. What are you? Yeah, online ordained, of course. those that are wondering.
I can't think of any apocalypse things. I generally tend to stay away from that.
Well, you got Ragnarok from Viking mythology,
Yeah.
right? End times narrative there.
The only games I know are Call of Duty and Skyrim.
Well, yeah, Call of Duty has some apocalyptic imagery.
Yeah.
I forget which one it is that has nuclear bombs going off. And they like it's in the US, and there's a kind of nuclear attack. You're in the helicopter.
Yeah, I don't know which one you're specifically talking about, but they generally tend to have Nuketown, which is a town that you go around and fight in multiplayer.
Oh,
and
right,
then,
called Nuketown.
Yeah,
Yep.
and then at the end of that round, a nuke goes off.
Oh, well, there we go. How does that help train you for surviving the nuclear apocalypse?
It doesn't.
I don't know.
In Christianity, the book of Revelations foretold of Armageddon, a showdown between Christ and Antichrist that would trigger the millennium, a 1,000-year reign of peace. Early American Christianity embraced millennialism, but by the late 19th century, most preachers had traded in their threats of worldly apocalypse for a more appealing message of personal salvation. After World War I, with its horrors of trench warfare, shell shock, and chemical weapons, science and technology came to represent, for many, a new Antichrist.
Well, I mean, you had a lot of H.G. Wells stuff
Mm-hmm.
coming up in that interwar period. Some of those would be in conversation with, I guess, some of that World War I apocalyptic imagery.
Yeah.
That triggered. And, I mean, you had the German expressionist cinema, Nosferatu, M. Murderer one, in that interwar period.
The Birds.
1916, even before motion pictures had sound, the Danish film The End of the World depicted the panic after a comet-threatened apocalypse. 1930s sci-fi magazines, such as Amazing Stories and Weird Tales, presented paranormal or extraterrestrial causes of Armageddon, as did the 1938 radio broadcast of H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds.
Yeah, there we go.
World War II replaced these
Yeah, War of the Worlds.
No, keep going.
Apocalypse. Yeah, and that's it. That's the alien invasion of the three categories. You've got one of the primal alien invasion texts there, War of the Worlds, as well as Orson Welles' radio broadcast of it, which then caused people to freak.
Back to the Birds.
That Alfred Hitchcock movie?
Yeah, that is an apocalypse sort of
1960s,
one.
yeah.
Where the birds go crazy and start killing everyone.
Totally. Yeah. It's not alien invasion. Maybe, I mean, is it a mutation or something? I mean,
yeah, this isn't something like that.
But it's definitely
Outbreak of birds.
outbreak narrative. Yeah. So it's a good text. Yeah, undeniably. But I think we're still in the 1930s. So the book, I don't know if it's based on a book. It might have been earlier. War of the Worlds. I'm also thinking H.P. Lovecraft stuff, like the Cthulhu mythos. You're talking 1920s there. So
apocalyptic visions with a new, real, horrific weapon. Designed in Los Alamos, detonated in the Alamogordo Desert, and dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the atomic bomb became the new symbol of apocalypse. In the Cold War that followed, scientists developed thousands of far more powerful thermonuclear weapons which turned biblical prophecies of fire and brimstone into real possibilities. During the Cold War, eschatological lore mixed with nuclear fears to create new apocalyptic visions. In the 1950s, a barrage of mutated giant insects, them, the giant scorpion, comic book superpowers, Spider-Man, X-Men, and sci-fi monsters, Godzilla, barraged a youth culture increasingly fascinated with radioactivity.
Yeah, so you have that idea of nuclear imagery through radiation, that idea of radiation as a hot button topic, I guess, as something in storytelling that then does something. So I guess for Godzilla, the idea being that nuclear tests caused some mutation, caused Godzilla to exist, come into existence. Spider-Man, so comic books, you have the idea of the radioactive spider biting Peter Parker, giving him his mutant powers. Them? Have you seen the Them 1950s? It's I think it's set in Los Alamos or something. It's these ants that get irradiated and they become super giant ants.
Yeah.
Super giant. And so that's radiation. Yes. And look, Astro Boy in a different way, right? So he's atom powered. Astro Boy from the 1950s comic manga that it's based on. Again, reflecting the kind of interest in storytelling power that exposure to radiation causes, right? Either, mutations or superheroes.
Literature presented radioactive dangers with less camp. Neville Shute's 1957 book, On the Beach, warned how drifting radioactivity from a limited nuclear war would kill survivors in the southern hemisphere. Walter Miller's
it's really interesting on the beach because, of course, it's primarily set in Australia as one of the last outposts that still has surviving human civilization. But they're all slowly dying anyway. And the story goes of this U.S. military force which had been in the area and which is stationed up in Australia as part of this last survivor group, are receiving this Morse code message from the U.S. So they decide to go there because, maybe there's someone that survived. They get there and it's, spoiler alert, it's a Coke bottle that had been caught on a windowsill, like a blind, next to a Morse code set that had accidentally been, as the wind comes, it would accidentally trigger the Morse code. This Coke bottle would, So it's this really depressing, nihilistic view of survival. It's not a mutating apocalyptic vision. It's just, this very sad, we've all got, 1 or 2 years of life and we're all dead in literature.
59 sci-fi classic, A Canticle for Leibowitz, told a tale of underground monks and above-ground mutants in a dystopian post-nuclear society. Harlan Ellison's short story, and later the film, A Boy and His Dog, presented a similar apocalyptic scenario, as did numerous sci-fi magazines. With so many cultural reminders of atomic annihilation, it's not surprising that video games, a medium that still heavily borrows from film and literature, appropriated these ideas.
So he's setting up the idea that in the generation before video games, so if we're saying video games started with like Atari moment on, so the 1970s, that previous generation, the 50s and 60s, that were creating TV shows and movies and books that were integrating and working around these ideas of radiation are going to make gestures and basically co-opt them. But that's pretty much all the time we've got. 4:53. Can play a little bit more. We'll cap it off. We'll see where this takes us, and then we'll set it up as a cliffhanger for a future show.
1980s, it was natural for video games to feature nuclear war as the cause of a global apocalypse. Preventing the apocalypse.
Well, this is another new chapter. So we're going to have a look at preventing the apocalypse next time. And in the meantime, see if, Steam actually has just started its sales. So see if you can pick up Alien Isolation, Crisis. We're going to play all these games. Earth Defense Force series, Mass Effect 3.
Or Call of Duty 6, and I'll team up with you.
Is your in-name gamer name tag DJ TJ?
No.
Or is it K-Popiverse?
No.
What's the point then? For that series...
I'll change it.
What is your gamer tag?
It's in Korean.
Ooh, is that the name of it? That's a pretty good name. It's in Korean. So search It's in Korean in thing, and you can join up with Taylor. Wasteland series, and more. So show notes will be available on the podcast and other spaces.
Will it be on the podcast or on the website?
Probably it'll be in the description field.
Okay, yeah. Fair enough.
the podcast. next week we might pick up with that topic of nuclear preventions. Also, I noticed that for the next 2 days or so, if you've got Amazon Prime, you can watch the 1980s Matthew Broderick film War Games for free.
Have you seen the War Games?
That's different from War Games?
Yeah, the
19... Doctor Who?
Yeah, the 1970s.
Yeah, totally. Isn't that Patrick Troughton?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Isn't that one that got lost? And
one of the ones that got lost, yeah.
So what are you watching it, like half cartoon?
Half cartoon, half.
Yeah. Actually, it's one of those ones I've only ever heard of, right? Soldiers from throughout time and Earth being collected, and they're all, in this war field, and the best of the best are then going to get recruited into this mad aliens invasion force.
Yeah.
What could go wrong? So we might bring that up next week as well.
Have you seen The Gunfighters? William Hartnell putting on the worst American accent.
Wow.
As they pretend to be in a gunfight.
Actually, on an aside, I mean, ending the show with what's making you happy, like they do on Pop Culture Happy Hour. What's making me happy now? I came across this bizarre mad scientist project that a group of Doctor Who fans are doing.
Yep.
Where they, I feel the name of the guy that's doing it. Basically, he hates those animated versions.
Yeah.
Right? He says they're complete trash. So he decided to get together a group of friends, and they've done now a few episodes of series that have been lost. So they've just got the audio track. That they've basically used AI, like one of those AI video generators, to generate the episodes.
I mean, that's horrific in itself, isn't it?
Oh, you've got to see it.
It's all right?
No,
terrible.
It's really, but it's one of these things that's got some praise from some community members in the Doctor Who community who love it.
Okay.
And a lot of people trashing it, just saying, this is everything that's wrong about like stable diffusion video AI programming, that it looks so dead-faced, and you're basically, I mean, what they've taken is William Hart, all the actors' faces, but they've done them as prompts to prompt them. The production, I mean, it's all fans that are doing it. It's meant to have some, animated talent cleaning it up. But it's like at points faces merge with guns, and it's got all of the pitfalls that contemporary AI generates. Some of it, proof of concept does suggest, wow, like it could be something that gets done, where basically you're recapturing that series again as it would have been filmed, but then using AI to construct it. But with the quality of, like, they're basically using off-the-shelf stuff you can get on a web browser to create. So it's And you can see a couple of React videos fans have on YouTube. There's a couple of React videos where fans are just critiquing all that's wrong with AI at the moment through this piece. But one of them that they did is the Highlanders.
Right. Okay.
Right. So I'll show it to you later. Anyway, so check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Better just do the audio adventures.
Yeah, audio adventures are safest. Some of them are.
All right. Well, it's 4:59. We'll end there because we're about to go into J-pop, K-poppy verse. No, what's it called again? K-pop Unlimited.
That's the one.
With DJ TJ.
At least it's memorable.
DJ CJ. Well, possibly will go together a little smoother than today's show for me.
Maybe, hopefully.
Maybe. So tune in next week where, if all the technology works, we'll dovetail into that a bit further. That's been Media Mothership for another week here on Edge Radio 99.3 FM. I've been Dr. Craig.